being here. Thank you for coming for this program and for the talks. It's a great pleasure to introduce and to share this conversation with Peace staff, an artist that we have a very long relationship as we did a project together a few years ago here at LUMA, a project that started from certain areas which involve the topics and the themes of the program this time around superstition and magic. And this is also going to be the main topic, the main theme of our conversation. But before we go to the conversation, I will introduce shortly the work of P, which is his practice unfolds at the intersection of performance, moving image, installation art, but also writing and sound, and deeply engages with questions around embodiment, power, care, survival. Very often you are working with forces that are shaped by political, medical, social, and technological issues and concerns, and body plays an important role in the work, particularly trans, queer, non-normative bodies and realities, and regulations or protections or abandonment, but also systems of power play a key role in the way that you are questioning the evolution of our societies. We started a road trip some time ago, and this road trip led us to talking about a lot of the issues which are relevant today: astrology, planetary systems, the world, politics, the transitions and transformations which are intimately connected to planetary movements, the evolution of life on Earth, the evolution of life outside of Earth, and explorations that took us in really strange and different places, but also very important places when we kind of like pieced the whole puzzle together, that was manifested into the work conjunction that was here. We started the road trip from the desert of New Mexico, Santa Fe, together with Maya here. We had the opportunity of visiting some places that were different, let's say, scientifically, but also in the way that we approach the world. We became interested in a very unique experiment that took place in the 70s and 80s called Biosphère II. And that experiment gave us the impetus of trying to find and locate the people behind it, the moments and the ways of thinking that gave rise to this experiment. It was an experiment that eventually could lead into life in other planets, instigated by certain individuals who were interested in creating a new form of community that could potentially, let's say, exist in Mars. So we were fascinated by this kind of like desire to create new societies in other planets, how they went about it, what forms and methods they followed. And we decided to go and meet them. And it was incredibly rich in terms of encounters, but also the road trip itself that we did was incredibly rich in terms of opportunities and possibilities of viewing the world in specific ways. Do you want to say a few things about the road trip? Because it was like really the beginning of everything. It gave rise to a lot of questions and a lot of issues.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. I mean, whenever I tell this anecdote to friends, I always try and set the scene by saying, you know, I was doing a residency in Dublin in 2019 at the Institute of Modern Art there. Vassilis came to visit me there. And the way I remember it going is that Vassilis was like, okay, we're establishing this like experimental institution in the south of France. We want to invite you to be part of the conversation, to be involved, to be an artist with us and think with us. But first, we want to go on this road trip. And again, I remember Vassilis sort of pulling out of his bag a set of papers about this place, Biosphère II. I wasn't hugely familiar But I was game. So yeah, I met Maya and Vassilis in Santa Fe in New Mexico, and we set off on this like 3 or 4 day trip. The culmination, just to sort of go to the end and work backwards, is that I produced this exhibition, this work that was commissioned by LUMA called Conjunctions, kind of as a result of this process. And there was another thread that was weaving through this at the time, which is that at this point in late 2019, I was incredibly preoccupied with an upcoming astrological aspect, which is called the Great Conjunction. It's when Jupiter and Saturn meet in the sky. At this point, it was late 2019, so in about a year's time, in December 2020, we kind of all knew, practicing astrologers knew that this Great Conjunction was going to happen, that these planets would be conjunct at basically 0 degrees in Aquarius. And on the one hand, it's a huge shift in epochs and energy and context when any outer planet, when one of the slower moving, larger planets further away from us changes sign. It's a big deal when they are conjunct, when they're trining, when they're in these aspects to one another. But in this instance, Jupiter and Saturn were going to be conjunct in an air sign. And it began a period of a 200-year cycle where they would only meet in air signs. And for the past 200 years, they had been meeting in earth signs. And so we go on this road trip to Biosphere II to kind of meet these people and talk about establishing life on other planets and all of this. And then my memory of it is that concurrently, we were just obsessing about astrology. Maya and I were talking endlessly about astrology and slightly torturing Vassilis with this. But it's almost like these two strands of research and preoccupation and kind of obsession were happening in tandem. These are my iPhone pictures of us. So in Santa Fe, we went to a place called the Synergia Ranch, and that is where a group of hippies, come scientists, come theater performers live. They're older, they're in their like 70s, maybe even 80s. And it's a group of people that met in the Haight-Ashbury. They formed a theater group, they sailed a boat around the world, and eventually they would come to establish this project, the Biosphere II. It's kind of a big thing to summarize. I don't know what our best...
I think maybe very quickly, Biosphere II was a closed system that manifested as a building, like a massive greenhouse of sorts, inside which all the maybe 7, let's say, natural ecosystems were represented, from the steppes to the jungle to the tropics, very close to each other, and in which 8 individuals locked themselves in for a number of months to try to see if they will be able to survive in lockdown conditions in another planet. Meaning that the system that they had created had no connection to the outside world, the world, like life on Earth, basically, despite the fact that it was built on Earth. It worked for a number of months, and then it stopped working, and other forces came into play, like internal fights between the people who were there, lack of food, injuries. So everything started kind of like disintegrating slowly, and the experiment ended. But it was not only an experiment inside the biosphere, inside the space, but also it was massively televised at the time. The lives of the people were being observed and recorded and shown on American TV, I think, on a daily basis. And it's as an experiment, it had multiple forms and formations, but also multiple outcomes for each one of the individuals. And for us, it was interesting to see how each one of those people perceived what had happened inside and what was the outcomes of their experiments and what is useful to keep or not to keep. And obviously, like the fact that they were really preparing for life on other planets. This was the ultimate goal, to be able to survive on other planets.
Right. And, you know, what Vassilis is describing is obviously an incredibly complex scientific project. These are in the pictures us starting to get to the Biosphere II. You know, it's an incredibly complex scientific project because it's a materially closed ecological system, meaning the air they breathe, the food they're eating, everything exists entirely sealed. To get into the biosphere, you were going through a number of airlocks. These glass domes had what were called iron lungs, huge chambers that would push air and circulate it through. And as Vassilis said, each member of the project, each of the scientists, committed to live in there with nothing coming in or out. What was striking to me once we got to the ranch and met this group was that they considered themselves a theatre group, that their origins had been in community theatre, essentially, like not exactly theatre of the oppressed, but this kind of socially driven performance, and that a lot of their research had its origins in like psychedelic drug culture, transcendental meditation, lucid dreaming, these number of magical, superstitious, experimental, mind-expanding experiments. The official narrative of the Biosphere II is that it was a rigorous group of scientists. And in some ways it was, you know. But the reality in visiting them was realizing how all of these alternative knowledge systems were fed into the project. And, you know, we all have a tendency and we all run the risk of separating these into categories of knowledge that are like reasonable and unreasonable, you know, factual and superstitious. And what I find compelling about this type of project is that collapse, that they were farming and the farming was as important as the astrology, and that the astrology was as important as the biological study of the body and whether it can exist in this closed system. Just a side note, something I love is that they called it Biosphere II because they considered Earth Biosphere I. And so the establishment of Biosphere II at this point was just a dome. But the aim truly was that another planet, in this case probably Mars, would become the Biosphere II.
One of the things that was striking when we were there was actually the belief that man had already gone to Mars. And this was something really incredible to listen to because they were discussing very detailed mapping systems, very detailed like scientific experiments having taken place there in Mars from different scientists, from different backgrounds. And at the same time, we were also discussing astrological maps and the connection of these systems of meaning or understanding the world was incredibly different, but also they were convinced of all of these elements in the highest level. And this is something that it's interesting that is also the theatricality, as you said, from the performance side, the theatricality of like giving meaning to all of those things that were considered scientific or parascientific or unexplainable, that they were deeply convinced that many things have happened that possibly in our lifetime we might not see as possibilities anymore. And then from this visit, a lot of things happened after, because the visit actually led to the work conjunctions, but in completely different circumstances and conditions, because there was massive shifts in global realities. And I'm talking particularly about the lockdowns and the pandemic that ensued our visits there. We transformed every kind of way of working in the foreseeable future from the moment that we were there. Do you want to say a few things about that? How this kind of like the work adapted?
Yeah. I mean, so this is it's a complicated timeline in a way. We were visiting the Biosphere II. I mean, there's an irony to it, right? Like the three of us were there in the southwest of the US, talking endlessly about what a closed system looked like, what it would be to be shut in, to be locked in, right? And the irony that none of us knew that that was shortly coming. There's also an irony, as I was mentioning, to this fixation on an upcoming set of astrological conditions and aspects that, I was sort of fixating on it. There is historically, particularly in Arabic and Hellenistic astrology, that this conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn leads to the kind of crumbling of power. Austin Coppock, the astrologer, referred to it as being a time in the kind of orb of influence of this conjunction that leaders start to play musical thrones. And I remember talking with Vassilis. We were actually driving around the Camargue, and it was raining like crazy. And I was like, "No, Vassilis, you don't understand. Like, whoever's the president is going to die. Like, whoever's in power is going to be assassinated. There are these historical precedents, of global systems of power crumbling. A number of planets moved to Aquarius in that period, and naturally, Aquarius as a sign has this relationship to humanitarianism, to a kind of global cause in a way. Yet at the same time, as a Saturn-ruled sign, it's incredibly cold. It doesn't have the sense of justice or empathy that you might find in other signs associated with this kind of idea of a humanitarian mission. And so there is this sense that the Aquarian condition is one which is concerned with the fate of humanity, but is not moved by it and does not mourn it. Saturn as a planet is, in a way, the gavel, the kind of ruling fist, death itself. And, it is us as mere humans that attach all of this kind of emotional stuff to it. This idea of Saturn ruling is actually cold in a way, or ambivalent. Anyway, so there's a line of my own thinking as an artist that's quite hard to track here. But, you have to imagine that we are trying to understand this closed system, this vivarium, this glass container of contained life. I am fixating on this idea of the conjunction. A conjunction essentially being when two planets occupy the same zodiac sign and are close in degrees. If we divide the sky into a number of degrees, astrology being incredibly mathematical, it's when the two planets are at very close degrees in the sky that they're considered conjunct. And then we go into lockdown. And of course, one of the conditions of COVID, one of the conditions of lockdown is about proximity, is about propinquity. I can't say that word, propinquity. How close we are to one another. There's something interesting about the idea of the conjunction in Hellenistic astrology, which is that often the Hellenistic astrologers didn't consider it a true aspect, an aspect being when the planets are mathematically seeing each other in some way. For the Hellenistic astrologers, it wasn't considered a true aspect because the planets didn't see each other. If you're degree-based, if one planet is over here and another is over here, they see each other. And this act of looking, this act of witnessing, this act of testimony has a set of conditions and has a set of powers and has a set of meanings, material forces. The conjunction is blind, but it is felt. The planets are affecting each other through an orb of influence, but again, it's this like sensuous traction. It's a felt experience of pushing one another. It makes me think of the way that Vassilis and I could close our eyes right now and probably understand that we are in physical proximity to one another. That each of you in the audience, subconsciously, unconsciously, is negotiating your proximity to someone else. Your breath matching another person, your knee naturally not touching someone else's. The way that we materially and spatially compose ourselves is a material force, right? And so in a way, after this really intense and impactful kind of research trip with Vassilis and Maya, we move into isolation. And this great conjunction that I'm fixated on is rapidly approaching. And that is essentially what ends up producing the exhibition that we finally were able to stage here at LUMA in 2021. The work, you saw some images, we'll loop back around at some point, was a large hanging LED screen, a soft LED. We usually think of LED screens as screens of any kind of being incredibly rigid. We sourced a type of architectural soft mesh LED. It's designed usually to wrap around buildings. In this instance, we hung it as kind of a soft curtain. On the screen is a video that unfortunately I can't show you because it was really designed for this LED viewing experience. But it's essentially a text poem flashing on the screen that in a way was my notes, my fixations, my hypotheses, my linguistic tics and repetitive thoughts that were occurring kind of in lockdown, kind of in what I would consider a magic register in a way, this repetitive incantation. But also it was trying to bring these different threads of research and experience into conjunction with one another, and also propose to you, the viewer, a kind of provocation of the conjunction. I was thinking I would read it to you all. I don't think that the translator were given a copy of the poem, which is my fault. But I guess we can see how we do. So this is the poem, which is called Conjunctions, and it was what played on the screen in the exhibition. There are two planets touching, a conjunction of touching you as the end of you, and the limit is living sexed in here. It's fucking the thing that fucks you back harder, living and unliving, dead and undead. Two planets touching and a president dies. A planet dies, another is mapped out and your cunt is free and you build it anew. You and life substitutes. You and every object. You and each bio project. You and reproduction. You and repurpose touching. You and plastic fingertips. You and plastic chairs. You and plastic valves. You and your free will as a conjunction, two planets touching. You and all scarcity. You and two planets colliding. You and tut-tut. You and mucus snorting. You and an artificial egg cum dome, made animal, made object, made effluvia, made transit, made empty. You and your new frequency. You and male pattern baldness. You and urinary retention. You and your interactions. You and the earth freed is you and all mitosis. You and evolutionary potential is you and 150 million people sterilized. So you and a tourist, you and a funder, you and a patron, you and a lover, you and a technosphere, you and wastewater, you and a pair of lungs, you and waste removal, you and cloud cover, and you and the scorched earth, you and a planetary dysphoria never touching, you and death, you and extinction, touching as two separate conjunctions, extinction, and the undying is seen in a man-made ocean. You and a virus, you and feeling, ultimately joining together in the same space, air unbreathable, unless by lock and grip, concrete rubber shattering upwards. And every horizon has a miasma. Every piece of glass is uranium. And yours is no different. Your home is no different. No home, not belonging. And suffering is a fluorescent feeling. And sensitivity is the reanimation, where it is you as a gift. You as a gift by not. You as a gift by not being nor present. You as a gift by not being nor present nor countable. You as a gift by not being nor present nor countable nor appending. When I read it, it feels quite strangely calming. I think just because of the rhythmic quality to it, but as I assume Vassilis and anyone else that was here would testify, in the context of the show, it was pretty aggressive. It felt kind of brutal when we showed it here at LUMA. Part of the installation was that we used transducer speakers for the sound attached to a Perspex plastic ceiling. So whereas most speakers play audio by sending sound waves into the air towards you, a transducer speaker transmits sound through touch. The speaker is attached to a reverberant surface, so in this instance it was plastic, and the sound is conducted through this material. So rather than hearing the sound in the space as you usually would, it was kind of vibrating through the ceiling above you. And then in the space of the exhibition, we produced a series of glass orbs. They were, on my part, I think, an attempt to feel breath through material. Again, I think probably we were all very preoccupied with breathing at the time. And so and in my studio in Los Angeles, we're working on all of this, and you can see the glass orbs around. We're working on all of this pretty long distance between Arles and Los Angeles. I would blow up a balloon, allow it to deflate, photograph it from a number of angles, try and draw it, and then send these diagrams to the glassblower, who I think was in Marseille, and try to essentially breathe air into the glass and then let it deflate again, and have these present in the space as a kind of talisman, omen, physical emanation of breath, entering and collapsing again. Yeah, I don't know. I just said a lot, Vassilis. Bring me back to
Thank you so much for reciting the text, the poem. Yeah. I just wanted to ask you in terms of the conjunction and the effects of the conjunction of the planets. Obviously, they can be seen through the prism of a specific historical moment or a specific moment in time that was the pandemic and the lockdowns that followed. Do you see the effects continuing into progressive crisis moments or progressive transformations? May those transformations be transformations of certain systems that collapse and certain systems that are being born at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. And, maybe to give some context to this, as someone who was studying and practicing astrology, my closest interlocutor is Johanna Hedver, who spoke last night. Margaret Haynes, who's based in Paris, an astrologer there. The increasing amount that I would study and practice and teach with others, I became less and less interested in what we call mundane astrology. And so this sense of the day-to-day astrology. This type of sun sign astrology emerged very recently. It's a 20th century construction. This idea of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, what is you, I'm a Leo, you're a Pisces, this kind of thing. This is a really modern invention, and it was a move by a number of astrologers to shift astrology as a practice away from its more mystical origins. It was an attempt to legitimize it in the eyes of a larger public by shifting towards this more psychological, psychoanalytical idea of astrology, to bring into prominence this idea that the locus of astrology is my chart, your chart, what you are, what I am. And, you know, when you begin to sort of move backwards and dig deeper and look at the kind of ancient stuff, and, you know, there are probably astrological reasons for this, but luckily this has really come into prominence, like people really returning to Hellenistic astrology in these earlier forms. It kind of frees you from the rampant individualism of it. In these earlier astrological texts, astrology was used for looking at these larger historical epochs. It was used for looking at the rise and fall of empires, the building of cities, the emergence of diseases, but also deep kind of material inquiry. Quite literally, you know, a sense of what is hot and what is cold, what is wet and what is dry, what is the land and what is the air kind of thing. And so, you know, increasingly I'm in this time like studying and practicing astrology, and it becomes really tedious to talk with people about whether or not they're gonna get a new job or find a new lover, what the mood is going to be from week to week. You know, the inner planets, the ones that we see more clearly in the night sky, the ones that are closest to us, the kind of core of astrology, the inner planets, Mars, Venus, the moon, all of this, they move really fast. You know, every few days, every few months. And so in some ways, like the weather, I became, you know, a little bit like, yeah, it's raining today. Yep, the moon just changed signs again. Yep, the energy has shifted. And by looking deeper historically, it allows you to think in 20-year cycles, 200-year cycles, 800-year cycles. It allows you to sort of peel away your own individualism from the whole thing. And to see these like generational shifts, these generational signatures. So yeah, like this moment in the end of 2020 where, you know, Saturn moved into Aquarius. I mean, we've sped away from it already. Saturn changes signs something like every 3 years, and so we already went through Pisces and have just recently moved into Aries. But it is the beginning of these new eras, essentially. So yeah, I mean, I think you know, in terms of this great conjunction, we moved away from a shift of power being this incredibly material concern. If you think about the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in 2000, this was much more about globalization, shifting economies, financial crisis, that kind of thing. And it feels like now in Aquarius and then in the subsequent air signs, you know, we are dealing much more with AI, with weapons, with these sort of unseen, immaterial forms of conflict, warfare, shifts in power. Yeah, and this kind of thing. There is just one fun, like, kind of final point that I really missed, a lot of astrologers didn't, which is that in Arabic astrology, this great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn is often talked about as the deadly corruption of air. It's a moment where kind of noxious gas rises out of the earth and into the air. And so many astrologers were already talking about some sort of flu, some sort of airborne illness. Like I said, I was just completely preoccupied with hoping that Trump might be assassinated. Probably still have fingers crossed, you know. But yeah, once you can peel yourself away from trying to figure out your own personal astrology, you know, it is nourishing to look at these greater shifts.
Mm. Yeah. And when is the next big conjunction?
They're just always happening.
Oh, why don't we know about it?
There's no escape. There's no escape. It's you know, again, I became a really bad astrologer because I started just telling people, like, just don't think about it. Don't worry about it, you know? You're just being blown in the wind.
Yeah. Do you think the kind of like looking at the astrology as a form of more broad perspective into the world rather than the individual day-to-day or weekly or monthly realities also can provide certain aspects of thinking about the future in different ways? Because also the future somehow in this kind of like moments, it's something that has taken a step backwards. We're kind of thinking about dystopias much more, so it's much more easier to neglect the ideas of the future as something positive.
Yeah,
and I just wonder like whether this kind of like bigger astrological, let's say, thinking could inject renewed energy into thinking about the future as possibilities of the unknown rather than as dystopian like boundaries and walls, borders.
No, I don't think. I mean, you know what's beautiful about Hellenistic astrology, as Johanna was saying last night, is that it sort of lets the doom back in. It lets fate back in. It lets death back in. These, you know, these things were all evinced, as I said, by this emergence of a more psychological form of astrology. What I think astrology is good for, what I think it has benefited me in a lot of ways, kind of comes back to this thing that I was saying about conjunctions, of deprioritizing certain forms of knowledge and allowing others to come in. In astrology, every material body has speed, has weight, has an energetic field, an orb of influence. It has light. You know, the foundation of astrology is just looking at how things move, how quickly, whether they're moving backwards or forwards, these like optical illusions and all of this kind of thing. You know, as an artist, I sort of just began thinking about exhibition making as a form of understanding these material attractions and these material influences. Understanding that everything has speed kind of changed how I move through the world fundamentally. If we are able to consider the world as a confluence of forces, I think the best thing we can do is just be increasingly sensitive to them. That's what astrology actually allowed me to do, rather than predict the future, predict the past, or tell someone if they were going to be rich or poor, you know.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking P for being here.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
I think we have time for a couple of questions. Yeah.
I was excited to leave.
Hi, P.
Hi.
I feel like color is such a huge component of your work. Can you talk about how, for the LUMA installation, like where the color palette came from in the lighting?
Yeah. I mean, if anyone that has seen my work in other contexts, there is often a use in my work of this intense saturation of fluorescent color. You know, in some ways it began as this interest in a deadly corruption of air, a deadly corruption of light, wanting to use in particular yellow as a kind of curdled or corrupted form of sunlight, but also this sense of irradiation. I don't know, I think in LUMA, in this show, Conjunctions, there was a leaning into both the sensuality and the alienation of light. On the one hand, to be bathed in a color could be transcendent in some way. It could be ecstatic, religious, kind of beautiful, you know. And at the same time, there is a complete saturation and an inescapability and a sense of dissolving that happens, perhaps of subjectivity or of control. There's something kind of sadistic and pleasurable about casting all of us in a pallid light, a form of light that might evoke sickliness or radiation or a kind of irreversibility.
And the orbs, of course, had this very kind of like fluorescent green integrated into the glass blowing technique.
Yeah, I mean, I forget who the quote is attributed to, but neons are often understood as the color of kind of man attacking nature or man attacking the earth. Fluorescent technologies obviously emerged concurrently with warfare, particularly the Second World War. I was kind of obsessed with uranium. The Synergia Ranch that we were talking about, where this kind of commune was established. If I remember this correctly, John Allen, the kind of father of this group, the leader, described buying this plot of land in New Mexico with the plan to build a commune on it, realizing that it was rich in uranium, and being able to sell this to the US government and fund a lot of the practices of this commune. And, obviously there's something kind of maybe shocking or ironic about that. And at the same time, I think it is a kind of perfect narration of the history of the kind of hippie movement in North America. It's essentially the birth of venture capitalism. Is rooted in Haight-Ashbury and LSD and all of this kind of stuff. And so trying to understand this, I almost want to ask for forgiveness for how, associative this is rather than tangibly articulated. But this obsession with uranium coming from the earth and into glass and into the decorative arts, dug out of the ground and used both in warfare and also mass destruction. I don't know. It's a fixation that shows up in my work kind of frequently.
Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you
very much.
everyone.
There's no more questions. Thank you again for being